Hi everyone, this is Kunal Bothra. Welcome, namaskar. Thank you so much for joining us for yet another fantastic session of a YouTube live. It's been a drilling market. I know over the last few days we've seen a maximum kind of a carnage or a pain, especially in the mid caps and small caps. But hey, that's how it is, and that's how the markets they tend to be. But today on the YouTube live, there are some very interesting things which I want to share, and some of the observations are absolutely classic in nature. So just ensure that you watch the entire YouTube live till the end of the session because today I'll be discussing some classical observations and trying to answer the big questions. That is, when will this first leg of a major correction end for the index? And end means like I would say sort of a very strong possibility that the first leg of a correction would probably end for the index. When could be the zone where you as traders, you as investors can start buying? So that are two big questions. The third is that whether such kind of selling, what we are witnessing right now, whether it's happened in the historical aspect, and if that has happened, how that has actually been very similar to the current market trends and what we can foresee, forecast, or maybe try and extrapolate from the previous historical trends. So we'll try and answer many of the queries, many of the aspects in today's session for YouTube Live. But before we begin, like we urge all our viewers every time that don't forget to like, share, subscribe the channel, ensure that you have any kind of a comment or any kind of a view, or if you have a differentiated opinion, do share your opinion on the comment box. I'll be very glad towards trying to take or maybe try and indulge in a different set of technical analysis or any kind of a market analysis based on your readings or your observation. So thank you so much for joining, and we will start off with today's session for YouTube Live. So yep, there it is. So today's session for YouTube Live, I'll start off with what are the aspects and why the markets are going through a correction. So the first point which we have is that when will this selling stop, right? Now to understand that, let's first see that how the selling has been happening for the index. It's a stage by stage selling which is happening for the index. Now let's look at the recent for the November highs and December highs for the Nifty, which was around 24,700, 800 levels. Now let's look at this in the first aspect. What the markets did initially, try to identify a previous major zone of support that changed behavior, and you saw the support acting as resistance. So this became the first band where the index took support, we bounced off sharply, and that became a zone of resistance. So the moment we managed to break below this critical support, the index fell below. After a series of correction, we managed to bounce back and retest that resistance zone, which means approximately this zone is around 24,000, 24,200. If you remember in our previous YouTube live, on Thursday we mentioned that the markets would probably try and come closer to that 24,000 mark. This level coincides with the observation which we highlighted in the previous YouTube live. That's on Thursday. So don't forget, if you guys have logged in for the first time, don't forget to watch that Thursday session where we mentioned that whenever the markets go into a recovery phase, why this 24,000 level should be tested first. Okay, now the next series of data point is after this first major support, the next support for the index, okay, which was at this zone where the index bounced off twice, that is closer to 23,500 mark. So for a period of almost 3 weeks, three and a half 4 weeks, we were trying to protect that 23,500 level for the index. We failed to protect it. Because of the kind of selling we've seen from the FIIs, of course, and that's where we saw the index moving into the next leg of correction. So if you can see that there is a 600, 700 point kind of a drift which happens every time. Now look at the next zone. The next zone of support is where we've broken today. Okay, on 27th of Jan, which we are discussing, we've broken today the third leg of price correction, where we've broken the series of support of 23,000 on closing basis for the Nifty. So this forms the first major observation that we are moving in a chain, we are moving in a step, and after every step, there is almost like a 500 to 700 point of a further correction for the index, which means after the break of this 23,000 mark, of course, the first level of support lands up closer to 22,000, 22,000, 300, 400 kind of a range. That's first observation. Now the second is we looked at the pattern of selling, और ये बहुत interesting है because if you are looking to time your entry, even if you're an intraday trader, or if you're looking to time what the patterns are within the day and how the FIIs and FPIs they're looking at intraday market corrections as a trend, this could be fantastic. Now we looked at the last 7-10 days of the market selling, and we saw a very classical pattern that there is a 2 hour window where maximum amount of selling generally takes place. Okay, I'm saying maximum amount of selling generally takes place. Now the first hour of window is something which starts off from 9:20. So immediately after the market open, 9:15 Indian markets open. In the first 3, 4, 5 minutes is where the first top for the index starts off, and that's where the first round of selling happens. So as you can see, these are intraday charts, like intraday charts clubbed together. So intraday chart over here indicates the first round of top happens, then comes the first hour of selling. एक घंटे की सेलिंग हो जाती है 10:20, 10:30, 10:45 thereabouts. So 10:30 plus minus 10 minutes is where we believe the first round of selling generally completes. Then follows some recovery for the Nifty, some recovery on an intraday basis for the index. Then the second round of selling happens just around that 130, 145 mark. So if you look at this, this coincides with the global market timings, also the European market timings. So around the 145 level is where the second round of correction starts off, and that takes the index further. So if you see that there is a very small minor window just between 10:30 to 12:30, 1 o'clock thereabouts, where the index goes into a process of a bounce. Let's look at this on, say, another day. Over here, the index got into a first leg of correction, 1 hour of correction, then a recovery, then a second round of correction which happened intraday. But the first leg of a correction was very sharp on the back of higher volumes. Then from 145, so generally क्या हो रहा है? If at 10:30, whatever the low index is made, if there is recovery immediately, then around 145 there is one more leg of correction. If after 10:30 the first round of correction, if the index falls further, then the session from 145 is actually a buying session. So as you can see here, the index fell in the first hour, then there was a recovery, and because there was a recovery after 145, the index was onto a selling spree again. The next day it was different. The index fell in the first hour, then there was some bit of recovery, then there was another leg of correction, and then the index after that leg of correction managed to rise in the last half an hour. Look at this first round of selling, intraday correction. Just prior to 145, the markets were higher than the first low. If the markets were higher at 145, which means one more round of selling pressure. Look at this day. Okay, 9:20 the index starts off, first hour of selling, some recovery. 145 के पहले index is at a new low on an intraday basis. That's why from 145 the session turns and you see a correction, or rather you see a recovery or a rally. And this day again very different, where the FIF first goes into that first hour of selling, and then 145 को अगर market ऊपर है तो second round of selling starts off. Now, why is this significant? Because it is generally said or assumed that first hour and closer to the last hour of the session are the two sessions where there is heavy volume or heavy participation. So generally क्या होता है, हम भी as a human being, when you start trading, the first hour is generally becomes more active, where you are like pumped up, you want to trade the markets depending on where they're opening or where they're likely to open. And then closer to the last hour of the trading is where you want to wind up the positions, you want to just pare down your positions, cut down your positions, maybe increase few positions over there. So that's the preference slot for the FIIs, because they become, I mean, they come into this kind of a time zone to try and reduce their holdings or maybe go at selling the indices. Now, this is what happened in the last 2 days. Okay, 9:20, first hour of selling, index falls, some recovery, we come back again, but 145 says second round of major selling starts off. टुडे वेरी सिमिलर 920 गैप डाउन होने के बाद में थोड़ा सा रिकवरी आया एक दो टिक का बट फॉर फर्स्ट 1 hour द मार्केट्स सोल्ड ऑफ दिस वाज अराउंड 10:30 where the index formed a bottom we rallied for the next 1 or 2 hours but 145 के आसपास पे एक second round of correction वापस आया so we are seeing this pattern regularly that there is this two window 9:20 to 10:30 and then closer to 145 to 2:45 or 3 o'clock is when there is a selling pressure on the indices. So just be very careful if you're an intraday trader. You need to know which areas or which time zones you would want to avoid if you want to trade actively. Okay. Now the second part is very important of today's discussion is why there is a sudden decoupling with US. Now there's this fantastic, as a channel with ET now, we're discussing with a lot of FIIs over the last few days in terms of the selling. And then there's one observation which I think every now and then, each of the FIIs are trying to hint towards. The observation goes by this. Now imagine the US market or the US economy is actually growing. The green line, what you can see, is where the US markets are growing. The red line is where the emerging markets like India, ex-Japan, and many of the other emerging markets, Brazil, etc., they go into a rally or a recovery mode. Now, the first leg, if the US markets rally, is where the emerging markets see a higher proportion of rally. But there comes a point where beyond a certain point, the more incremental rise in the US market will actually lead into a correction in the emerging markets because then there is a higher degree of confidence which comes into the US market. So we are now in that zone where there is a likelihood that the US economy may start growing, of course, because of expectations, a lot of expectations on the new Trump regime. And because of that, you're seeing money being withdrawn from many emerging markets and the money shifting back towards US, whether it's bond yields or US in terms of the larger economy as such. Now, this leads us to the first question is that what happens and when could our markets start to recover? Our markets would typically start to recover only when you see US markets starting to moderate or if US markets start to correct. So, like for example, today we are seeing Dow Jones futures down by 400 points and Nasdaq futures down by some 700 points because of that, data seek in terms of the China, which could probably be the new technological revolution which could impact US. So, if we see in the next few days or in the next 1 or 2 weeks more correction happening in the US markets, that could be positive for the emerging markets because a fear in US, a fear amongst the US investors would lead the money rush back again into the emerging markets. So it's a very interesting space, very interesting news flow. I would urge all of you to watch this space if the US markets go into a further tailspin or into a sharp correction. This could be positive for the emerging markets and including Indian markets. So hopefully that quantum of selling from the FI can reduce and we may start to see some intraday stable bounce backs for the index. The second question, of course, is whether it's cyclical or structural. Cyclical basically क्या होता है? When there is a season जब the earnings go up, the markets go up, and then there is a natural phase of correction. That's cyclical in nature. It happens with every sector, every industry, every market times. And structural is something where there is a major correction which happens and then India as a story gets over. I don't believe specifically that it is anything with regards to structural. It is completely cyclical. There was a point where the Indian fundamentals were way too overvalued, and that's why I think we're seeing a point where the earnings are getting just about moderated. We are in the zone where the P is around 21. My belief is that closer to 20.25 is where if the India P comes back, that could be a phenomenal first zone where earnings would start to moderate. So that tells you that maybe from 21.2 thereabouts where we are, we may come back to 20.2. That could be a drop of another 4-5% on the index. So which means from 23,000 mark, the first level of support in terms of the P or in terms of the moderation of the P should be 4 to 5% lower. That should be just around that 22,000 mark. So a second instance where we are saying that 22,000 levels could be a decent first leg of support for the index. But the third part is very interesting. And this I thought I'll just share it with you in terms of chart observation. Why the current sell-off is very similar to the previous leg of sell-off. Now this is 2009. Okay, guys, just hear this out very, very interestingly. This is 2009. Now we know 2009 was something very similar when there was a sharp sell-off like in 2020. 2009 say what we did is that we just drew a Fibonacci extension line. We took the lows of 2009, joined it with the highs of 2010, a 2 year, 2.5 odd year rally, and then connected back again to the lows which the index had formed. So this was the first leg of a correction for the index. Now, as you can see, just after 3-4 years of the market rally, this was the first peak point for the Nifty. And after this, the index fell. It fell to almost 61.8% as a retracement. तो आप देखो ये zone जो है 61.8% retracement से 50% retracement. This becomes a zone where long-term traders, investors, they start buying, and India as a story becomes hugely attractive. Okay, in terms of price points, I am trying to explain this to you on the charts on technical basis. Now, why is this significant important? We come back to 2020 and you would be amazed with this observation, right, guys? Amazed. Okay, let's take the Fibonacci extension. This is the line from 2020. We take the first high which was made in 2021, after which we had a first leg of 10% correction. We join it to the low. Look at the top being made. Absolute classic. Okay, we joined the low of 2020, connected to the first top, and then to the first 10% correction which we had in 2021, 22, and we extrapolated that. The 100% correction lands up at 26,200 to 400 zone, and that is exactly where we made a high. But that is not the end point. The point is ये करेक्शन कहां तक रुकेगा. If we go back to the previous history of 2009, 2010, 11, 12 and so on, the 5 years of the trend for the index, we saw that 61.8% retracement के आसपास में India starts to become attractive again. So which means, where is the 61.8% retracement, guys? It lands up to 22,000 levels approximately for the Nifty. Okay, which means the Fibonacci series of indicators tells us that the first major zone where you should not miss, I always believe that don't waste an opportunity in crisis. Okay, you never hardly get crisis. It's like once in 3 years, 4 years. But जब वो मिलता है, grab it with both hands, irrespective of what the prices would be and whether in the next 3-4-5 days you see 1-3% correction. But as a long-term investor, don't miss out on those major opportunity in terms of crisis. And so as we proved, first is that the first leg of major correction could probably happen once the index falls below 22,000 mark, and that could be a zone where first long-term buyers, they may start to come back into India. So don't be disheartened if we see another 750, 800 point correction on the index, because this is natural at par and something which we've seen on the historical basis. And this may happen in a very staggered manner. So that's point number one. The second point is also very interesting. What we did is that we took a trendline support for the index, and we are trying to join this trendline support for the Nifty. So as you can see, this is the first leg of major support which comes back into the index. So which means that also happens closer to 22,000 mark for the Nifty. So just around the 22,000, 22,500 is where we believe that there is going to be a first major retest of a support. And now we look at this in terms of the chart. So now, okay, this is the first leg of the chart. So this is first leg of the chart, okay, where on a long term basis. So this is the monthly chart for the index. What we did is very, very simple. We just took a trend line low, joined the 2020 lows, and then we are looking at the first leg of major support for the index. So as you can see, the first leg of major uh, support for the Nifty lands up again at these levels, which is 22,200 approximately. आपको दिख रहा है ये वाला zone अगर हम monthly charts पे देखें तो. So hopefully, if in the next few weeks we down to say 22,000 mark, that could actually be the first leg of a major plus point for the index. I hope that you found this very, very interesting. In the next few YouTube lives this week specifically, there are a lot many points which we are going to discuss because the budget is lined up this weekend on the 1st of February 2025. We'll be discussing the budget trends and the statistics. In the previous budget sessions which we discussed on statistic basis, we discussed on few ideas that what happens on the budget day and pre the budget, at the budget, and post the budget, which are the stocks and sectors you can bet on. So we'll be discussing that specifically in the due course of this week. So again, don't forget to subscribe to the channel as well as view the videos on Technical Tea, and don't forget to like, share, and share it amongst your friends, amongst your families, and don't forget to comment. If you want to add anything, if you want any of your queries to be solved, we can take it in the coming up sessions for YouTube Live. So thank you so much, guys, once again for patiently hearing me, and we hope to see you in the next YouTube Live sessions because it's going to be very, very engaging and very, very analytically solved the puzzle of the major market correction which we are going through right now. Thank you, guys.